Welcome to another Tech Insight, where we show you how to make your workspace work. In this episode, we're going to show you how to extend Citrix Workspace's authentication options with using your on-premises Citrix Gateway. When accessing the user's workspace, they'll either launch Workspace app or access Workspace via their web browser. When the user enters in the URL, what ends up happening is the user gets redirected back to the on-premises Citrix Gateway, where they will be able to log in with their ID, password, and another factor if we're using multi-factor authentication. Upon successful authentication, we're redirected back to Citrix Workspace, where the user is going to see a list of all their available resources, including apps and desktops as well as files. The user now can go ahead and launch any of these applications and be signed on to them automatically. To better understand how this works, let's look at a conceptual architecture for a user accessing a Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop deployment. The user is going to access the gateway, which is going to authenticate them to either Active Directory, Active Directory Radius, or Active Directory plus certificates, plus many other options. When we try to integrate this environment with Citrix Workspace, what we can do is have the user authenticate to Workspace. At that point, Workspace will use the Identity Broker microservice to redirect the authentication request to the on-premises gateway. From there, the user can then log in with Active Directory plus Radius or Active Directory plus certificates or any of the other authentication options that we have available to us within Gateway. Also, we could utilize N-factor authentication with our on-premises gateway and integrate that with Workspace. So in an N-factor deployment, what we could have is a user who's on a trusted device accesses Workspace, the Identity Broker microservice, then sends that request to Active Directory plus a certificate. Since it's a trusted device, we have certificates on these devices. Now, if this same user would access the environment on an untrusted device, what would happen is they'd get to Workspace, be redirected to the on-premises gateway via the Identity Broker microservice. Because this is an untrusted device, instead of using Active Directory and certificate, Gateway will redirect us and utilize Active Directory plus a Radius server to fulfill the authentication. And once that's done, the user will then be able to get access to all of their resources. Now that we understand the flow, let's incorporate our on-prem gateway with our Citrix Workspace environment. The Identity and Access Management section of Citrix Cloud allows us to select which authentication methods we are going to allow within the environment. So when we enable the Active Directory plus Gateway AAA, we need to enter in our public, fully qualified domain name for our on-premises gateway. When Citrix Cloud detects this, we then get a set of client IDs, a secret, and a redirect URL, which we're going to utilize within our on-premises gateway configuration. As an admin, we need to connect to the on-prem gateway and authenticate. This will allow us to make changes to our running configuration within the gateway. We want to navigate through Security, AAA Application Traffic, Policies, Authentication, and then we need to set an Advanced Authentication OAuth IdP profile and policy. The profile we're going to create is going to link this gateway with the configuration that we have running in Citrix Cloud. So after we give it a name, we need to now link those unique characteristics of our environment in the cloud to the on-prem gateway. So we take the client ID and add that into the client ID as well as the audience. We copy the secret, put that into the client secret, and then we go ahead and select the redirect URL and enter that into our OAuth IdP profile. Now the issuer name is the fully qualified domain name of our on-prem gateway that users access. And we also need to select the send password as part of this. When you create profiles on a gateway, you also need to create the policy of when this profile is going to be executed. So we'll go ahead and give it a name. The action's already been selected. This is the policy we just created. And we're just going to set the expression to be true because we want this to run. From the gateway perspective, the last thing we need to configure is to bind this policy to our authentication virtual server. Now this authentication virtual server is also bound to our gateway virtual server. So when we bind this OAuth IdP policy, it'll be connected to our gateway. Now we need to make this OAuth IdP policy, when we add the binding, the priority for this particular policy needs to be higher than other authentication policies we have within this authentication virtual server. So a higher priority means a lower number. So in this instance, we'll use 10 because the other policies, I believe, are at a priority of 100 for LDAP plus radius. The next part of the configuration requires us to get access to the CLI. So we're going to go ahead and make that connection to our gateway device and log on. Now we need to bind a certificate globally to our VPN. So if we do a show VPN global command, you can see that there's no certificate bound globally. So we'll do a search for the certificates that we have on our gateway. And then we're going to go ahead and bind our certificate to the VPN, but we're going to do it globally with the global parameter. After we finish that command, we can go back and look at the show VPN global command. We'll be able to see that this certificate has now been bound globally to our gateway device. Now when that configuration is done on the gateway, we go back to Citrix Cloud and we go test and finish. And this is going to verify that it is able to communicate correctly to the OAuth IdP policy within our on-prem gateway. The final aspect from the Citrix Cloud perspective is to enable this as our authentication for the workspace environment. So now when a user logs in, they'll get redirected to the on-prem gateway and sign in with their username, their password, and their radius token. With this capability, organizations can continue to utilize the investments they've made in on-prem systems while expanding to utilize cloud-hosted services.